the middle of the 1960s, Opel had a problem. The German automaker, owned by General Motors, wanted to build a flagship coupe. Something big, luxurious, and impressive. A car that would sit above its Admiral and Capitan sedans and make a statement. The company had the design skills and the assembly plants, but it lacked one crucial thing: a powerful engine. Opel didn't have its own V8, and developing one from scratch would take years and cost a fortune. So the company made a bold choice. In 1965, Opel introduced the Diplomat V8 Coupé, and under its hood sat a Chevrolet small-block V8 shipped directly from America. The first Diplomat V8 models used a 4.6-liter Chevrolet 283 cubic-inch engine. For Americans, this was everyday transportation. For Europeans, it was something else entirely. A V8 engine in Europe at that time was still an extreme rarity. Most European cars ran on 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder engines, often smaller and less powerful. The Diplomat changed that equation. Opel's engineers worked with General Motors to fit the entire Chevy drivetrain and automatic transmission into a brand new Opel chassis. The result was a personal luxury coupe that looked like it belonged on American highways, but carried German build quality and European styling touches. The choice of an American engine wasn't just about power. It reflected GM's global strategy. Opel had no V8 of that size in its lineup, so borrowing technology from Detroit made perfect business sense. The coupe's body and suspension were designed and built in Germany by Opel's teams, but the engine arrived from across the Atlantic. Those early Diplomat V8 models made about 220 horsepower by the old United States rating system, which later translated to 187 horsepower when measured by stricter German testing standards. Drivers who got behind the wheel discovered a car that felt smooth and torquey, with effortless acceleration. The Diplomat offered a relaxed, torque-rich automatic drivetrain that was something still quite out of the ordinary in Europe, even though it was utterly ordinary in the United States. That contrast defined the car. A big, smooth V8 paired with an automatic transmission was normal in America, but exotic in Europe. This gave the Diplomat strong performance, with a top speed of about 124 mph or 200 km per hour, and easy highway cruising that made long Autobahn runs feel effortless. But the first engine choice proved problematic. The Diplomat was a heavy car, and at high speeds on the Autobahn, drivers noticed the Chevrolet 283 was working harder than it should. The cooling system strained under the load, and overheating became a concern. Opel needed a solution, and it found one back in Detroit. Starting in 1966, the Diplomat V8 received the Chevrolet 327 small block V8, a 5.4-liter unit that offered more power and better reliability. This new engine boosted output to about 230 PS, which equals 170 kilowatts, and helped resolve the overheating issues that had plagued the earlier models. The upgrade made the car more capable, but it couldn't fix the fundamental problem facing the Diplomat in the European market. European buyers had mixed feelings about this big American-powered coupe. The car was large and thirsty, drinking fuel at a rate that made Europeans wince. Gasoline wasn't cheap in Europe, and efficiency mattered more than in the United States. The Diplomat was also expensive, priced nearly as high as a top-tier Mercedes-Benz. It offered luxury and presence with an undeniable American character, but it was too big for European parking lots and gobbled up too much fuel. The car existed in an awkward middle ground. It was too American for traditional European buyers, but too expensive for those who wanted straightforward American muscle. Only 347 Diplomat V8 Coupés were ever built between 1965 and 1967. That tiny production number makes it extremely rare today. It was essentially a Chevrolet engine and transmission wrapped in an Opel body, a hybrid that didn't quite belong to either continent. After 1967, Opel redesigned its flagship cars and dropped the V8 Coupe from the lineup. The experiment was over. The Diplomat V8 remains a fascinating footnote in automotive history, a bold attempt to blend GM's muscle car power with European luxury that didn't sell well enough to survive, but left an impression that lasted decades. The Gordon Keeble GK1 was born from ambition and racing experience. Two men created it: John Gordon, an engineer who had previously built the Peerless GT, and Jim Keeble, another racing-tuned engineer with a passion for performance. In 1959, these two joined forces with a clear vision. They wanted to build a grand touring coupe that could compete with the best cars in the world. Their approach was unconventional. They took a small English chassis from Peerless Motors and decided to bolt on something completely unexpected: a Chevrolet Corvette V8 engine. The founders didn't just talk about it. They shipped a 283 cubic inch or 4.6-liter Chevy engine to Britain and built a working prototype. This wasn't a subtle car. The American V8 gave it enormous performance, far beyond what any British engine of similar size could deliver. Gordon and Keeble were confident enough to take their British-built prototype across the Atlantic to Detroit. There, they met with Chevrolet management and made their pitch. Chevrolet was impressed. The company agreed to supply Corvette V8 engines and gearboxes for production, giving the tiny British operation access to one of the most powerful engines available. By 1964, the Gordon Keeble was ready for production, now fitted with a larger 5.4-liter or 327 cubic inch Chevrolet V8, making around 300 horsepower. To keep weight down and costs manageable, the body was made of fiberglass, a common material for low-volume sports cars. The design came from Carrozzeria Bertone in Italy, giving the car a striking fastback profile. It featured wide tires, 4 seats, and even a clear glass roof panel that flooded the interior with light. The combination was impressive. When automotive journalists got their hands on the car, the reviews were glowing. The GK1 was a car which is way ahead of anything else in its class. The car was an electrifying 4-seater. In plain terms, everyone agreed the Gordon Keeble was very fast and remarkably smooth for a road car. Testing showed it could exceed 140 mph, or 225 kilometers per hour, far quicker than most European cars of that era. But success in reviews didn't translate to success in business. The Gordon Keeble team made a critical mistake. They underpriced the car to attract buyers, selling it for about £2,798, well below what comparable cars cost. The low price brought interest, but destroyed the profit margins. The company struggled with funding and faced constant supplier delays. By the middle of 1965, the company went bankrupt after producing only about 82 cars. The dream seemed over, but two new investors, Harold Smith and Jeffrey West, bought the company's assets and briefly resumed production. They managed to finish a few more cars, with the last one completed in 1966. They even assembled one final car from leftover parts in 1967. In total, exactly 100 Gordon Keeble GK1 models were ever made. The GK1 never had a chance to reach widespread production, but its legacy endures among collectors and enthusiasts. It stands as a perfect example of British ambition meeting American muscle. John Gordon eventually left the project, and Jim Keeble tried to carry on production under different company names, but the core story remained unchanged. This was a lightweight British GT coupe, powered by a big General Motors V8, a combination that delivered incredible performance but couldn't overcome financial reality. Today, the GK1 is remembered for its rarity and its performance, and for the unique way it combined a Detroit engine with European style. This ill-fated Gordon Keeble was refined and powerful, but financial troubles meant only 93 cars had been built by late 1965. It was a car born of passion and expertise, built by people who understood engineering and racing. But it also illustrates how tough the sports car business could be for a small company without deep pockets or corporate backing. ISO Rivolta was an Italian company with an unusual history. Founded by Renzo Rivolta, it spent the 1950s building the Isetta microcar and a luxury grand tourer called the IR 300. But in the early 1960s, Rivolta wanted something more exciting. He wanted to build an exotic sports car that could stand alongside Ferrari and Maserati. To make that happen, he hired designer Giorgetto Giugiaro and later brought in engineer Giotto Bizzarini, who had just left Ferrari. Together, they created the ISO Grifo, a car that debuted as a concept in 1963 and entered production in 1965. From the very beginning, the Grifo was designed around an American V8 engine. The decision came from an unlikely inspiration. Rivolta had seen the Gordon Keeble prototype at Bertone and was impressed by its Corvette V8. He liked the engine so much that he decided to use the same approach for his own car. General Motors was more than happy to cooperate. American V8 engines were exotic in Europe, but plentiful in Detroit. They offered something European engines simply didn't: enormous displacement, high power output, mechanical simplicity, and proven reliability. American V8s were everything European engines were not. They were large, very powerful, understressed, and extremely reliable. General Motors was more than happy to provide Corvette V8s to ISO. For GM, it made perfect sense. An Italian Grand Tourer built in small numbers didn't compete with their own products, and it gave Chevrolet engines prestige in the European market. The first production ISO Grifo, known as Series 1 or GL for Gran Lusso, went on sale in 1965. It used a 5.4-liter Chevrolet 327 small block V8, making about 300 horsepower. These engines were built in the United States and shipped to Italy for final assembly into the Grifo chassis. The body was a sleek, wedge-shaped coupe designed by Giugiaro at Bertone. Under the long hood sat that American V8, giving the car performance that could embarrass much more expensive European exotics. After 1968, ISO offered an even more powerful option: a 7.0-liter, or 427 cubic inch, big block Chevrolet engine in a special model called the Grifo 7 Litri. By 1970, ISO introduced the Grifo Series 2 with pop-up headlights and the even bigger Chevrolet 454 V8. The company kept increasing engine sizes to stay competitive in the supercar market. Later, in 1972, ISO switched to Ford's 5.8-liter Boss 351 V8 for a model called the IR8, showing the company was willing to source American power from different manufacturers. At its peak, the ISO Grifo was a legitimate world-class supercar. It offered European styling and Italian craftsmanship with American muscle under the hood. It was very fast and luxurious, targeting buyers who might otherwise choose an Aston Martin or Maserati. The combination worked brilliantly from a performance standpoint. The Grifo could match or beat far more expensive competitors in straight-line speed while offering better reliability than temperamental Italian engines. Unfortunately, like many low-volume exotic car makers of that era, ISO ran into serious business trouble. In 1974, after the 1973 oil crisis devastated the market for thirsty performance cars, the company went bankrupt. By that point, around 1,200 Grifos of all versions had been built, a respectable number for a small manufacturer, but far from enough to sustain the business. The story of the Grifo is fundamentally about that Corvette V8. The car was essentially a Corvette engine and transmission mounted in a custom Italian chassis and wrapped in a beautiful Bertone-designed body. From the car's first appearance in 1965 to its end in the middle of the 1970s, the ISO Grifo demonstrated how a powerful American engine could be perfectly matched with Italian style and engineering. The charm was in the blend: European design, coach-built body construction, and General Motors V8 power under the hood. It proved that you didn't need a complex, expensive European engine to build a world-class sports car. Sometimes, the best solution was the simplest one: buy a proven engine from Detroit and build something special around it. Frank Reisner was a man who crossed continents to build cars. Born in Hungary, he moved to Canada and then to Italy, where he founded Intermeccanica in 1959. The small company spent the 1960s building various V8-powered Grand Tourers, often in partnership with American companies. Models like the Apollo and the Italia showcased Reisner's willingness to combine European coach building with American engines. In 1970, a new opportunity emerged. Opel, General Motors' German division, approached Intermeccanica with an interesting proposal. They wanted Intermeccanica to build a sporty Grand Tourer using Opel mechanical components and a Chevrolet 350 V8, then sell it through Opel's dealer network across Europe. The car would be called the Indra, and it would be styled by Franco Scaglione, a designer known for dramatic Italian automotive designs. At the 1971 Geneva Auto Show, the Indra made its public debut. It was a fiberglass-bodied coupe with a front-mounted American V8 and European styling flair. The car came in 3 different body styles to appeal to various buyers: a convertible, a notchback coupe, and a fastback 2+2 coupe with small rear seats. Under the hood sat a Chevrolet small block engine, usually the 327 or 350 cubic inch unit, measuring between 5.4 and 5.7 liters. Buyers could choose either a manual or automatic transmission. For the German market, where Opel wanted to sell the car through its dealers, a few Indras were fitted with Opel's inline 6-cylinder engine instead, and still badged as Indra to meet local regulations. The goal was to create a luxury Grand Tourer that combined Italian design with the proven reliability of General Motors power. Between 1971 and 1974, Intermeccanica built approximately 125 Indras. At first, the project looked promising. At the 1973 New York Auto Show, a blue Indra coupe impressed visitors and dealers alike. Many orders were taken for export to the United States, and Intermeccanica's future seemed bright. The company had found a formula that worked: attractive Italian styling, reliable American power, and backing from a major manufacturer like General Motors. Then, everything collapsed. In 1973, General Motors made a sudden decision. The corporation told Intermeccanica that it would stop supplying Chevrolet engines and Opel parts for the Indra project. Even worse, GM ordered Opel dealers not to sell the car anymore. The decision was devastating for Intermeccanica. Without the promised Chevrolet V8 engines and necessary components, production could not continue. The company later described the decision as almost a critical blow. By the time the engine supply ran out, 127 cars had been built. Intermeccanica was left with unfilled orders, disappointed customers, and no way to continue production. The reasons for General Motors' decision remain unclear. Some speculate that GM didn't want the Indra competing with its own products. Others suggest the 1973 oil crisis made GM nervous about supporting a gas-guzzling V8 sports car. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. The Indra died, and Intermeccanica had to move on to other projects. The story of the Indra illustrates both the opportunity and the risk of building a car around an American engine supplied by a major corporation. When the partnership worked, it gave a small company access to powerful, reliable engines it could never develop on its own. But it also meant the small company was completely dependent on the larger corporation's goodwill. When General Motors pulled the plug, Intermeccanica had no backup plan. The Indra's body was made in Italy with modern suspension design, but its heart was undeniably American. Today, the remaining Indras are prized as rare curiosities, European Grand Tourers with big V8 muscle under the bonnet. They represent a brief moment when a small Italian coach builder and a giant American corporation work together. And they show once again how, for a few years in the 1960s and early 1970s, European designers and engineers regularly turned to United States V8 engines for the power and reliability they needed to compete in the performance car market.